The executive lift at the Manhattan Business Tower rarely ever lit up for the 25th floor, especially not at 3 a.m. Yet that night, James Washington, a janitor who had worked the night shift for nearly 15 years, found himself standing by the polished glass walls of the boardroom, witnessing something unusual. On the other side of the glass, a woman crumpled onto a table so expensive it could have paid his salary for several years. It was Victoria Sterling, the iron-willed CEO of Sterling Industries, a name that carried weight across Wall Street and beyond. But at that moment, power meant nothing. Her face twisted in pain, her left arm limp, her attempt to speak reduced to slurred, broken sounds. James knew what he was seeing. The signs were burned into his memory. A stroke. He didn't learn this from textbooks or a classroom. He learned it at home. His late wife, Dorothy, had been a neurology nurse for 2 decades before a tragic accident took her life 5 years earlier. Over countless dinners, she treated their kitchen table like a training ground, teaching James how to spot warning signs and handle emergencies. For a split second, James hesitated. He was the quiet man in the background, the one executives walked past without a glance. She was the woman on magazine covers, commanding empires. Their worlds had nothing in common, except Dorothy's words ringing in his head. Medical emergencies don't care about who you are or what you earn. He pushed open the boardroom door. "Ms. Sterling, you're having a stroke. Don't speak, just listen to me," he said, steady and calm. His tone was not one of panic, but of practiced authority, the kind he had heard Dorothy use when families fell apart in hospital rooms. Victoria tried to argue, but her speech dissolved into garbled sounds. Fear widened her eyes as she realized she had lost control. James was already on the phone, 912. His is the Manhattan Tower, 25th floor, female, mid-40s, classic stroke symptoms, facial droop, left arm weakness, slurred speech. Onset about 5 minutes ago. We need an ambulance immediately. The dispatcher on the other end hesitated at the clarity of the call, a janitor rattling off neurological details like a trained medic. But James didn't stop. He continued to describe her symptoms in exact detail while moving Victoria into the safest position possible, preventing additional damage. By the time paramedics arrived, Victoria was stable, and James handed over a clear, concise timeline of what had happened. One EMT muttered to another, "This guy knows his stuff. Better than some nurses I've worked with." Hours later, as doctors worked to save the life of one of the most influential women in the country, James quietly returned to his mop and cleaning cart. To him, it was just another night. What he didn't realize was that the moment he stepped into that boardroom, everything changed. For Victoria Sterling, the experience would shatter her assumptions about status, race, and capability. And for James, the man who had been invisible for so long, that night was just the beginning of a story Dorothy would have been proud of. Sometimes, one act of kindness can uncover something far bigger than anyone expected. For James Washington, the morning after saving Victoria Sterling's life felt like it should have been just another shift. But when he arrived at the Manhattan Business Tower, reality greeted him with something different, a piece of paper taped to his locker. The notice was short and cold. Formal warning. Unauthorized use of executive elevator. Unauthorized access to restricted floors outside approved hours. Signed by Wilson Carter, the building's head of security, a man known for flexing his authority whenever possible, especially on those with the least power. James read it without flinching. 15 years on the job without a single complaint, and now he was being written up for saving someone's life. The irony wasn't lost on him. In a world of glass offices and million-dollar deals, doing the right thing could still be turned into an offense if you weren't the right kind of person doing it. What unsettled him more than the reprimand was the speed of it. How had Carter known about what happened in the early hours of the morning? Hospitals guard medical details carefully, and paramedics don't report to corporate security. Someone, James realized, was paying close attention to Victoria Sterling's movements. As he moved through his shift, James started noticing things. Around mid-morning, Dr. Andrew Patterson, Sterling's personal physician, arrived much later than usual. He wasn't calm. He looked rattled, almost angry. Through the glass doors of the executive floor, James caught a glimpse of Patterson locked in a heated discussion with Carter. It wasn't the look of a doctor calmly checking on a recovering patient. It was something else. Dorothy's voice echoed in his memory, as clear as if she were standing beside him. "Jammy," she used to say over dinner. When an otherwise healthy executive suddenly shows neurological symptoms, don't just ask what caused it, ask who benefits if they can't work anymore. Until then, James had assumed Sterling's episode was stress, maybe long hours finally taking their toll. But seeing Patterson and Carter so tense and so invested planted a different thought. Doctors usually breathed a sigh of relief when a patient pulled through. Panic didn't make sense. That afternoon, a call came through to the janitor's office, a call James never expected. Victoria Sterling wanted to see him. When James stepped into her office, the world he cleaned each night suddenly felt smaller. Victoria sat behind her desk, looking pale but steady, an unspoken curiosity in her eyes. "James, right?" she said, gesturing toward the chair across from her. "Please, sit. I wanted to thank you. The doctor says your quick action saved my life." James nodded politely. "I only did what anyone should have done, Miss Sterling." Her gaze sharpened. "The paramedics were impressed. They said you spoke their language. Medical details most people wouldn't know. Where did you learn that?" The question made his throat tighten. Talking about Dorothy always carried weight. Still, there was something genuine in Sterling's expression. "My wife was a neurology nurse, Chicago General, almost 20 years. She taught me a lot over the years. She passed away 5 years ago." Victoria's tone softened. "I'm sorry, truly." A pause, then, "James, can I ask you something unusual? In your opinion, did what happened to me last night seem natural?" The question caught him off guard. The CEO of a multi-million-dollar empire asking a janitor's medical opinion, and the way she asked, it wasn't casual curiosity, it sounded like suspicion. "With respect, Ms. Sterling, that's something for your doctor to answer," James said carefully. "I already did," she replied sharply, a trace of frustration slipping through. "Dr. Patterson called it stress, gave me sedatives and suggested I take a vacation." Something cold settled in James's stomach. Dorothy always said strokes at a younger age were red flags, and sedatives after a neurological event? That wasn't just lazy medicine, it could be dangerous. "May I ask," he said slowly, "have you had any warning signs before this? Anything? Headaches? Dizziness?" Victoria hesitated, then admitted, "Yes, headaches, disorientation sometimes." He told me it was overwork. Internally, James felt alarms going off. Any competent neurologist would have demanded tests after symptoms like that. Patters. One's dismissal meant one of two things: incompetence or something far worse. When James left her office, he noticed Carter in the hallway, watching. The smile the security chief offered wasn't friendly, it was a warning. That night, while the building was quiet, Dorothy's old words came back. Medicine doesn't leave room for coincidence. Patterns mean something, and if something seems off, someone usually benefits from it. James began to wonder, what if Victoria's episode wasn't stress at all? What if someone wanted her out of the picture? The more he thought about it, the more the details aligned. The warning note, Carter's surveillance, Patterson's evasiveness. For the first time, James realized that being invisible had its advantages. Nobody looked twice at the janitor, and if nobody saw him, nobody noticed what he noticed. For the next 2 weeks he moved silently through the building, watching, observing, and what he discovered only deepened his suspicion. Patterson visited Carter's office 3 times a week, always carrying the same brown medical briefcase. He never left it unattended. One night, as James pushed his cart down the corridor, he saw the door left slightly ajar. For a moment, the invisible man was exactly where he needed to be. James caught pieces of a conversation that froze him in place. "The test results still show worsening cardiovascular problems," Dr. Patterson murmured. "But the official reports remain within normal ranges, just like we agreed." "Excellent," Carter replied smoothly. "How much longer?" "With the medication disguised as vitamins, I'd estimate 6 more months until the next serious incident. And that one could be fatal." James tightened his grip on the cart, feeling the floor tilt beneath him. They weren't just neglecting Victoria's care. They were deliberately harming her. Dorothy's words echoed in his mind. The most dangerous betrayal is when a healer becomes the enemy. The final clue came from Marcus John, Unsan, the daytime HVAC technician. Marcus was younger by a decade, an Afghanistan veteran with sharp technical skills and 3 kids to support. "Man, you need to hear this," Marcus whispered during a Friday shift change. "I was swapping filters on the 25th floor and heard Carter on the phone. He mentioned Sterling Industries stock, buying big before some leadership change he already knew about." The pieces locked together in James's mind. Carter wasn't just part of the scheme, he was its mastermind. If Victoria died or became incapacitated, the head of security, who also sat on the emergency board, would temporarily control the company. With insider information, he could game the market for massive profit. "Marcus," James said cautiously, "do you still have military contacts, people who know how to gather evidence?" Marcus studied him, a soldier's instincts sharpening. "Depends on what you need. Why?" James hesitated only a moment before making the choice. In the next 2 hours, he laid everything out: Victoria's stroke, Carter's deception, the altered reports, his suspicion of slow poisoning. Marcus listened intently, his questions crisp and tactical. "That's attempted murder," Marcus concluded, "mixed with corporate fraud, but we'll need proof." "Not yet," James admitted, "but I know how to get it." They devised a plan, dangerous but simple. Marcus would tap into the building's systems, installing hidden recording devices in Carter's and Patterson's offices. James, with his unmatched knowledge of schedules and routines, would coordinate timing, especially on weekends when the building was quietest. As they reviewed ventilation schematics, Marcus paused. "Something's off. Why didn't they fire you? Saving the CEO should have made you a hero." James's lips curved in a thin smile. "Better to keep the janitor close. They think I'm just some lucky cleaner. Safer to watch me, too." Hand-risk questions. Carter and Patterson's arrogance confirmed it. In bits of conversation James overheard, they mocked him as the fortunate janitor, convinced he lacked the education to truly grasp what had happened. They couldn't have been more wrong. The first trial run came on a quiet Monday night. James worked his routine while Marcus moved through the ducts like a ghost, placing microphones and cameras with military efficiency. In under an hour, the surveillance net was complete, a job that would have taken a private investigator weeks. "Done," Marcus whispered over their secure line. "Now we wait for them to trap themselves." It didn't take long. By Wednesday, Carter and Patterson were in a meeting, and everything was captured. "The dosage is effective," Patterson reported. "Good," Carter said, amused. "We'll speed it up. The press will love it. A high-powered CEO crushed by stress. Perfect cover for the transition." James replayed the audio 3 times, his resolve hardening. Dorothy's lesson came back to him. Knowledge means nothing if you don't use it. This wasn't about cleaning floors anymore. It was war. By the following week, James carried something more powerful than any weapon. 3 encrypted drives loaded with 92 hours of recordings, 15 falsified medical files, and financial evidence meticulously analyzed by Marcus's military contacts. They'd found 341 suspicious trades, each one synced with Victoria's health crises. But James wasn't planning to simply hand it to the authorities. Carter and Patterson needed to learn their biggest mistake, underestimating the wrong man. The opening move would come at Sterling Industries' monthly executive board meeting. Victoria, still recovering and faithfully taking the vitamins prescribed by Dr. Patterson, sat at the head of the table as 15 executives discussed quarterly reports. Carter occupied his usual seat to her right, radiatized, the confidence of a man who believed he controlled the company's future. James entered the conference room with his cleaning cart, just as he had done hundreds of times before. But this time, as he discreetly emptied the trash cans, he slipped a sealed envelope onto Victoria's stack of documents. When she opened it, she found a single typed line. "The vitamins you're taking aren't vitamins. Check the bottle. Someone who cares." Victoria's expression shifted ever so slightly, though Carter, engrossed in his financial projections, didn't notice. James observed from a distance as she subtly reached into her purse to examine the familiar bottle of supplements. 15 years of being invisible had taught him how to read faces with surgical precision, and what he saw told him everything. Victoria had just realized something was terribly wrong. The second phase unfolded 2 hours later when Dr. Patterson arrived for his routine weekly consultation. He had no idea that James had hidden a directional microphone in the office lamp, or that Marcus was recording every word from a van parked across the street. "How are your stress symptoms, Victoria?" Dr. Patterson asked, his voice carrying the false warmth James had come to loathe. "Have you been taking your supplements as directed?" "Religiously," Victoria replied, though there was an edge in her voice that made the doctor shift slightly in his chair. "Actually, doctor, I'm considering getting a second opinion, just to ensure we're pursuing the best possible treatment." Through the microscopic camera Marcus had installed, James watched panic flash across Patterson's face. "That's completely unnecessary, Victoria," the doctor said quickly. "Your tests show steady improvement. A second opinion might confuse the treatment." "And how curious," Victoria interrupted, opening a desk drawer and producing the envelope and the supplement. "Bottle? Because I received this today. Someone suggests these are not vitamins. What would you say if I sent them for independent analysis?" Dr. Patterson paled visibly. "Victoria, you can't take an anonymous note seriously. This is clearly an attempt to sabotage your treatment. Some disgruntled employee trying to stir trouble." "Then you wouldn't mind if I had them tested?" she asked, her tone sharp and deliberate, the tone of a woman well-versed in high-stakes negotiations. "Well, of course I wouldn't mind," he stammered, "but it's really a waste of time and resources. I can assure you they're perfectly safe." Victoria raised a hand, cutting him off. "Doctor, in 15 years as CEO, I've learned that whenever someone tries to dissuade me from checking something, that's exactly when I must check it." The third phase launched with military precision. While Dr. Patterson struggled to regain control, Marcus was already delivering complete copies of all evidence to the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the State Medical Board, and the Chicago Tribune. James had insisted that Victoria learn the truth before the world did. She deserved the dignity of fully understanding how her life had been manipulated before the headlines broke. So on Friday at 5:00 in that afternoon, James knocked on Victoria Sterling's office door, a slim black briefcase in hand, its contents about to change everything. "May I come in, Mrs. Sterling? There's something urgent you need to see." Victoria looked up, immediately recognizing the man standing there, the quiet janitor who had saved her life twice before. "Of course, James," she replied. "I've been meaning to thank you again, and I've also been wondering, how did you know about the supplements?" James stepped forward, placing the briefcase on her desk with a deliberate, almost ceremonial care. "Miss Sterling," he said calmly, "what I'm about to show you will shock you. but you need to see it before the press runs with it tomorrow." For the next 45 minutes, James carefully laid out each piece of evidence. Audio recordings captured Carter and Dr. Patterson discussing a slow, calculated poisoning. Forged medical charts painted a false picture of her health. Bank records exposed Carter's secret trades, profits built on the expectation that Victoria's failing health would trigger stock shifts. Victoria listened without interruption. At first, there was disbelief, then growing alarm. Finally, her expression hardened into something cold and precise, a steel-edged anger James recognized as the kind wielded only by someone who has spent years building and defending an empire. "They underestimated me," James said when he finished. "Thought I was just the janitor, someone lucky enough to spot the signs of a stroke, but not educated enough to connect the rest." "And yet you connected everything," Victoria said quietly, her eyes scanning the files with the same intensity she gave a billion-dollar deal. "James, you've saved my life not once, not twice, but 3 times. This last one, the most important." What followed went far beyond anything James had imagined. Victoria Sterling wasn't just wealthy. She was a strategist, a woman who turned betrayal into a weapon. By Saturday morning, Carter arrived at the office for what he thought was an emergency meeting. Instead, he walked into a trap. Waiting inside were Victoria, 2 FBI agents, investigators from the SEC, and a representative from the State Medical Board. "Wilson," Victoria said, her tone glacial, like a CEO dismissing an employee who'd crossed the line. "Allow me to introduce some people who are very interested in your after-hours activities." Carter's composure faltered. James, watching remotely through the building's security feed that Marcus had discreetly hacked, saw the exact instant arrogance dissolved into panic. "Victoria, what is this?" Carter tried to sound calm, but the strain showed. "If this is some ridiculous accusation?" Victoria cut in with a humorless smile. "No, Wilson, they aren't here to hear rumors. They're here with warrants, evidence, charges for attempted murder, financial fraud, and market manipulation." Special Agent Martinez stepped forward and began reading Carter his rights. The protest started almost immediately, loud, desperate, empty. But there was no stopping what had been set in motion. At the same time, across town, Dr. Patterson was in his office frantically trying to scrub his computer. He didn't make it far. Agents stormed in, restraining him before he could hit delete. The final blow landed Monday morning when the Chicago Tribune splashed the story across its front page. The headline was impossible to miss. "Janitor Hero Exposes Plot to Kill CEO. Working-Class Man Saves Executive. Uncovers Corporate Conspiracy." The world learned his name, James. A quiet working-class black man whose late wife's medical training had left him with enough knowledge to save a life, and the courage to expose the people willing to destroy it for profit. The story soon captured national attention, but the true turning point came when Victoria Sterling held a press conference in front of a sea of cameras and reporters. Standing tall behind the podium, she confirmed every detail of James's extraordinary actions, and then stunned everyone by announcing his promotion to Director of Corporate Safety and Integrity at Sterling Industries, with an annual salary of $200,000. "James Washington," she declared to the nation, "has shown us that skill, honor, and intelligence aren't defined by diplomas or wealth. They come from character, and his character is unmatched." From their prison cells, Carter and Dr. Patterson watched the broadcast, forced to see the man they underestimated celebrated as a hero. Their defeat wasn't just legal, it was humiliating, public, and permanent. The irony was exquisite. Carter now faced a 25-year federal sentence for attempted murder and fraud. Patterson, stripped of his medical license, was sentenced to 15 years and left disgraced. Meanwhile, The man they dismissed as just a janitor was being honored nationwide as proof that brilliance can emerge from unexpected places. Dorothy would have been proud. The medical knowledge she had shared with James not only saved a life, but unmasked corruption that could have harmed countless others. And the quiet man she loved was finally being recognized for the wisdom and strength she always saw. 6 months later, James sat behind the desk in his new office on the 26th floor, overlooking Chicago's skyline. The nameplate on his door read, Director of Security and Corporate Integrity. The same building where he once pushed a mop now welcomed him as an executive with a $2 million annual budget and a team of 15 investigators focused on preventing fraud and protecting employees. Marcus Johnson, now promoted to Electronic Security Coordinator, walked in carrying a stack of reports. "Man, it still blows my mind we're here," Marcus said, glancing at the sweeping view. "Remember when you used to clean these offices?" James smiled, signing off on documents for the new scholarship fund named after his wife. "I remember every inch of this place," he replied. "The difference is now, I get to make real changes." The Dorothy Washington program was one of those changes, a full scholarship initiative for low-income students pursuing medicine, with a focus on neurology and emergency care. In just 2 years, it had already supported 120 students, many of them the children of janitors, security officers, and factory workers who never dreamed their kids could become doctors. Meanwhile, Wilson Carter adjusted to life in a federal prison where boardroom arrogance earned no respect. His assets were seized to repay those harmed by his schemes, leaving him reliant on public defenders he once mocked. Dr. Patterson fared no better, working as a medical equipment salesman earning a fraction of his former income, shunned by hospitals and peers alike. The medical community made certain he would never again endanger lives. Victoria Sterling, re-energized by the ordeal, reshaped her company into a model of ethics and transparency. Independent medical checks for executives became mandatory, anonymous reporting channels were created, and diversity and fairness became central policies. Investors noticed Sterling Industries' stock value tripled within 2 years, proving that doing the right thing could also be highly profitable. One afternoon, Victoria stepped into James's office. "James," she said with a smile, "the White House just called. They want you to testify before Congress about corporate medical reform." James nodded, now used to such requests. His story had sparked books, documentaries, and even lectures in medical schools, where professors cited him as proof that sharp observation mattered more than credentials. But what moved him most were the letters, hundreds of them, from ordinary workers, janitors, security guards, and clerks. They wrote to say his journey inspired them to trust their instincts, challenge injustice, and believe in their own worth. Looking at the framed photo of Dorothy on his desk, James asked quietly, "You know what she would say about all this?" "That medicine didn't just save one life," Victoria answered softly. "It saved the truth." James smiled, reflecting on the road he'd traveled. What started as quiet knowledge gained around a dinner table had evolved into justice, reform, and a message that rippled across the natty. Carter and Patterson thought they were exploiting a powerless man. Instead, they revealed the strength of someone who knew his value and refused to be underestimated. The lesson was undeniable. True intelligence doesn't hang on a wall in a frame. It's found where knowledge, courage, and integrity meet. James Washington had proven that ability has no color, no class, no title, only truth. And now, whenever workers face bias or wrongdoing, a quiet question echoes. What would James Washington do? The answer is always the same. Watch carefully, learn relentlessly, document everything, and act decisively. Because the best revenge is success so profound, your doubters can't even imagine it.